Hi, I'm your host Jürgen Strauss from Innova.buzz, and I'm really excited to welcome to the Innova.buzz podcast today, all the way from Cambridge, Massachusetts in the USA, the founder and CEO of Mavens and Moguls, Paige Arnof-Fenn. Paige is a remarkable entrepreneur who's transitioned from a successful career on Wall Street and in corporate America to founding a global branding and digital marketing firm. Her clients include a pretty impressive list, major names like Microsoft, Virgin, and the New York Times Company, as well as numerous startups and nonprofits. Welcome to the Innova.buzz podcast, Paige. It's a real privilege to have you as my guest.
Well, thank you so much, Jürgen, for having me. I'm really excited to talk to you today.
Now, your journey has been a really interesting one and testament to resilience, innovation, and the power of authentic marketing, which I know is as dear to your heart as it is to mine. So I'm really looking forward to learning more in our conversation today. Let's start by you sharing the impact you aim to make in the world.
My company's mission is to bring extraordinary talent and expertise to organizations that want to make a difference in the world, regardless of their size or budget. We help organizations find the right words and pictures to tell their story in a compelling way so that they can sell more of their products and services faster. So, the impact that I hope we're making, the ripple effects with these organizations, is to give them access to world class marketing talent and expertise that they otherwise might not have access to.
Hmm. Hmm. That's excellent. Now, the marketing um, Mavens and Moguls, the marketing company you started. Tell us a little bit about the name and also the model, because I find the model fascinating.
Maven is a Yiddish word for expert, or my great grandmother would say know it all. And a mogul, if you look it up in the dictionary, is someone of rank, power, or distinction in a specified area. So when I started the company, I referred to the women as the marketing mavens and the guys as the marketing moguls. And I just referred to them as mavens and moguls. This was as we were forming, when before we had any paid client work. I started the company right after 9/11, when the world was in complete disarray, and companies pretty much universally cut their marketing department and cut their marketing budget because the stock market had just
Hmm.
plummeted and people were worried they wouldn't be able to raise money, and there was so much uncertainty. Since then, I mean, this week we've had a roller coaster on the stock market.
Yeah.
Now the stock market will drop hundreds of points, percentage points. People don't even blink anymore. It comes back, it goes up, it goes down. But back then, more than 2 decades ago, it was really unsettling for the market. Like you said, I had had a successful marketing career at big companies like Procter and Gamble and Coca-Cola. I ran marketing at three successful startup companies that all had good exits. But when 9/11 hit, I had just gotten bought out of my third startup, and I started hearing from a lot of investors and people that ran businesses in a panic because they had laid off their marketing department, but they still had marketing problems.
Hmm.
And so people said, "Can you help?" And my first instinct was that, I'm not a consultant. I never worked on the agency side. I was the chief marketing officer. But the truth is, I knew a lot of people that had just been laid off of work, and I knew people with projects. I knew people that needed work, and I put them together.
Hmm.
And like I said, I had the Mavens and the Moguls, and I built a website with a college buddy of mine, and we just banded together to help organizations get through what I thought was a very temporary, unsettling period. And now, in retrospect, 22 years later, looking back, we survived 9/11, the Great Recession, COVID, the Great Resignation, quiet quitting. Like when you look at all the market trends that have happened
Hmm.
since then, it's pretty amazing. I would say at this point, we're probably more relevant today than we were when I started the company 2 decades ago. But we're basically a virtual marketing department for organizations that need marketing help on an as needed outsource basis.
Hmm. That's yeah, a really fascinating story, and I'm curious in terms of the work you do and the team that you've built up. Is do you kind of work closely together to make sure there's a standard that you work to, and there's processes and systems that you work to, and I know I'll come to the philosophy in a moment, but that everything is consistent across all those areas.
So, everyone in the group is a very seasoned marketer. I've got about 4 dozen people. They're based in 14 cities across the United States, as well as major metro areas around the world. And we have not done a project in Australia yet, but we have worked all over the world, Asia, Europe, um, South America, the Middle East, and we just form teams based on what clients need.
Mm.
Even though we're a virtual organization, I like to have a physical presence with our clients. So there's an assigned team leader for every active project, and ideally, I have a team leader in the market where the client is located
Mhm.
so that somebody can get in their car or jump on public transportation and meet face to face for a meeting, for lunch, for coffee, and have a conversation. But the team itself could be located anywhere in the world. When we did a project in Singapore, I had somebody on the ground in Singapore as the team leader, the kind of quarterback. But the actual team doing the work were on the East Coast and West Coast of the US. And so she would meet with the client and she would update the team on email before she left. And New York would wake up and get started on the
Mm.
project. They'd go to lunch, email the West Coast. They'd be working on it. They'd be in touch in the afternoon. Then the West Coast would finish up. They would email her the next, the final update of the day. She would wake up the next morning with, a 24-hour clock
Mm.
where people have been working on this client nonstop. And then she can pick up the phone or go have a meeting and say, okay, here's what we've learned. Here are my questions. And the client's like, wait, you were here
Yeah.
like 12 hours ago. What happened? And it just happened that, we had people that could hit the ground running in multiple time zones. So the system really works, which when we started, um, we were kind of making it up as we went
Mm.
along because people outsourced their accounting, their HR, their bookkeeping. People didn't really outsource marketing per se. They would hire an agency, but it always felt a little awkward, I think. People that felt like their brand, their marketing was kind of too close to their core. But it turns out the world has changed so much in the last, 20 years where, the sharing economy is now just a given. People share everything. Their houses, their cars, their sporting equipment, their boats. So, sharing marketing resources doesn't seem so scary
Mm.
anymore. We were just kind of very ahead of the curve, I think, in this particular area.
Yeah. Yeah. That's an amazing story, and it's I was always fascinated with this idea of working across time zones. And I remember when I was in the corporate world and leading global teams doing research into product development areas. And I had this exact vision that you described there, that we could do some work in this one time zone, and then at the end of the day, we'd hand off the work to the next time zone, who would then pick up and continue, and so do a 24-hour. And we never really got it off the ground, because part of the issue in our work was it wasn't knowledge work as such. There was a physical component. Well, it was knowledge work, but there was a physical component to it. So you needed to take that physical outcome of the first part of the work to continue the next stage of the work. And so it kind of fell over. And I was still quite young and naive then, so I didn't have the wherewithal to convince a lot of other people that this was a good way to leverage our resources that we had all around the world.
No, the world has changed so much. Like I
Mm.
said, I never wrote a business plan before I started. I think the world has conspired to make me look more like a visionary than I think I ever actually was. But I don't know. I feel like the time has definitely come to have access, to really great talent on a shared basis, because coming out of my corporate life when I did marketing for Procter and Gamble and Coca-Cola, those companies have enormous budgets. They can afford to have floors of people in marketing. They can have agencies around the world. The majority of my clients are not major Fortune
Mm.
500 companies. They're, mid-market, emerging market firms, maybe 2 million to 200 million in revenue. And they don't need to do marketing 24/7, 365 days a year. Brands at Procter and Gamble and Coca-Cola, they have budgets where they can afford to sponsor the Olympics or the Super Bowl or World Cup soccer. They have enormous budgets, and they are advertising. Their products are being sold in 100, 200 countries around the world, and they're advertising somewhere every single day. Many of my clients really, that is not a relevant challenge for them. They maybe have 3 trade shows a year that are responsible for 80% of their business, and they need a strategy that's very targeted to that particular market. They couldn't digest a marketing department that was, working 24/7,
Mm.
you know, week in, week out. So, our clients can bring us in for crunch periods, for product launches, for very discrete times when they really need more hands on deck, or more strategic thinking, or more people to roll up their sleeves. But then when that period is done, we can shake hands and part ways. So, whereas a lot of companies, I think, look at the marketing line item on their budget and they feel like, what's the return on that investment? They get uncomfortable thinking about the money that's, quote, being wasted.
Mm.
But when you can just bring in the resources you need, what you need, when you need it, you can actually kind of tie the expense to an outcome, so you can show an ROI, and people feel a lot better about it than they would when it was a constant draw on their cash flow.
Mm.
So I think it's much more relevant to the way a lot of small businesses work today, where you spend X, you get Y. The CFO's happy, the president of the company's happy, the board is happy. And so that it works very smoothly for a lot of small businesses today.
Yeah, yeah. And you touched on the 80-20 rule there. It kind of fits in with the 80-20 rule, right? Because it's probably the case that overall 80%, 20% of the marketing is bringing 80% of the business.
Exactly.
Hmm. Excellent. Well, you mentioned marketing is everything and everything is marketing in some of the quotes I've seen from you in various places. So, um, can you elaborate a little bit on that philosophy, and also talk to us a little bit about the humanness of marketing, which we had a brief conversation a little while ago, and how that's shaped your philosophy and the work you do.
So one of my professors made up that quote, that marketing is everything and everything is marketing. And when he said that in the classroom, I always kind of chuckled, thinking it was a joke. But now that I've been doing marketing for decades, I actually think he was exactly right.
Hmm.
Because if you think about it, if you're doing something, if you've got a product or service that solves a problem, but nobody knows about it, I mean, it's the tree fell in the
Hmm.
forest, and did it really even happen? Because no one was there to see it. And I think that a lot of the businesses that are survivors and that thrive in all these uncertain times we've been going through are not even necessarily the best products and services, but they have the best messaging, the best marketing. And when their customers have a need that their product or service can solve, that they think of those products and services first. And if you own that real estate in your customer's brain, that all of a sudden they think of you when they need your help, that is magic. That is the name of the game. So I definitely think marketing, the tagline of my company is because marketing matters. I really think marketing does matter,
Hmm.
because if nobody knows about you, if they're not thinking about you, if they don't know how to find you or what you do, there's confusion, you lose. And if you don't have a brand, you're a commodity. Commodities compete on price, and brands, create emotional connections with their customers, and people pay a premium for brands. And I just think that's just a basic fundamental truth in marketing. So I really do believe marketing matters. And I think the businesses that do the best job marketing are the ones that really are sustainable long term. So it's critical. Um, in terms of like my philosophy, what was the second part of the question? I've already forgotten.
Yeah, how does that shape your philosophy? That was, I think you've probably answered it in
Yeah,
some lines. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, if clients hear about us and we end up meeting and they'll say, I don't really believe in marketing. I think marketing is a necessary evil. That they, kind of hold their nose, and they'll say, like, I don't think it works, or I don't see the value. Um, if they are not open minded enough to have a very thoughtful discussion and be kind of have a growth mindset, be willing to experiment and test and learn, they would probably not be the best client for us, because I don't really want to work with people who are not who don't value
Hmm.
the what marketing does to educate people, to inform them, to entertain them. I look at it as letting people in on a great secret, maybe. You're really helping make the world a better place. You're helping people by, saving them time, saving them money. If something's more convenient, um, you know, those are all great qualities in a brand. And why wouldn't you want to share that with somebody? And if you've got a great story to tell, that only you can tell that story in that way. If you're doing it kind of biting your tongue and kind of begrudgingly going out there, I just don't think that's a great partnership for us. We want people who, you know, I am all about collecting data, being smart about it. I mean, one of the benefits I think of working with a partner more than a vendor, um, I think, as a marketing partner, I came out of the client side of the business. So I remember what it was like to sit on the other side of the desk. And I think when we're recommending things for our clients, we're recommending ideas and programs and um, tactics that we've tried ourselves. We've rolled up our sleeves and done this. And I think that's a huge competitive advantage because I spend your money the way I would have spent the money when I was the client, not just to spend it for spending's sake. You don't always have to do the most expensive thing, especially now with all the online marketing, social media platforms. A lot of times you can be very um, you know, scrappy and resourceful and just being smarter and more clever. And, if things go viral, you end up sometimes not even spending that much money, but really capturing the emotional connection with your client. And that makes me excited, and it's like a challenge, and the team gets really excited. And we're so happy when the stars align, like you said. It's a lot of work goes into it. There's market research, there's testing and learning, going back and forth. But when you get it right, it is really a magical feeling. And you want people who really see the value in kind of expanding, um, telling a great story and expanding the people's lives who they can touch.
Mm, yeah, I love it. You touched on a few things there that I would like to dig deeper on. So you talked about social media and some of the digital tools we have that probably 20 years ago were not quite as widespread. 30 years ago, they weren't even around. Um, in this age of digital, you talk about personal branding as well in some of the material I've seen, and why is personal branding still important in this digital age?
I think it's probably more important now than ever. A lot of small businesses think, I'm not famous. Why do I need to be a brand? Or I'm not really a brand. I think it's a waste of time or a waste of money. But the truth is, today everybody is online. There's so many platforms with all the different social media outlets. And yeah, like you said, when I started this business 22 years ago, none of it existed. And when Facebook started, it was just for college kids on campuses to decide if somebody was kind of cute and they wanted to date them or not. It wasn't a business tool, it was a social tool. Um, but as each of these tools and technologies were launched, and a lot of them crossed over to be more business tools and were used for business purposes. Um, I think there's been a lot of confusion in the market because I often get asked by clients, do I need to blog? Should I have a Facebook page? Do I have to be on LinkedIn? What is this Twitter X thing? How often do I have to post? Um, or people join and they do it without really thinking about it as a strategic tool to use. And if all you're doing is posting status updates about driving through to get a coffee at the coffee shop and doing your laundry and picking your kids up from activities, people are not going to follow you and they're going to ignore you. And it's boring and there's no point to doing that. Um, and I think people have to have kind of a social media strategy because today everyone's a brand. You don't have to be Beyonce or Serena Williams or Taylor Swift or LeBron James to be famous. I mean, there are influencers on social media platforms and nano influencers, micro influencers. You could have a small following of people that look to you for advice or trends, and that makes you famous just in a smaller niche.
Hmm.
and you don't want to abuse that relationship with your audience. So I always recommend that people pick their platform. What's the most authentic one for you? Pick one, pick two. Absolutely do not spread yourself too thin.
Mm.
If you have accounts on 4 or 5 different platforms and you're not really being thoughtful on any of them, you're not building a trusted relationship with your audience. You're diluting your brand, and it gets very confusing because on Facebook, you might be having more of like people put pictures of their family, their grandkids, their pets, they're on vacation, they're drinking, maybe they're on the beach wearing a bikini or, and then on LinkedIn, they want to look very professional.
Mm.
Um, and then on X, on Twitter, they kind of use that to be more snarky and a little, kind of off humor. I think that's a very risky strategy because you never know which version of the person is
Yeah.
going to show up for the meeting, for the podcast, for the coffee date. And I just feel like today, your online presence is everything. If we learned anything during the pandemic, it's that if you don't exist online, you really don't exist today. And when people are going to meet with you or return your phone call or be on your podcast, they Google you. And
Mm.
if you don't show up, you're nobody. Like why should they invest time to come meet with you and talk to you? If you show up and it's very confusing or there's some digital dirt out there on you, that's going to be a problem. So you definitely want to make sure you know what your digital footprint looks like. The other thing that's a little risky, with a name like mine that's hyphenated, um, your name, I think, is probably fairly unique. If they Google you and Google me, um, they're going to get us. And so make sure everything that pops up is stuff you're proud of and you want to be known
Mm.
for. If you have a very generic name, Jane Smith, Bob Jones, if they Google you, there's going to be a million people. And, one could be a serial killer. I mean, you don't know who these people are.
Yeah.
And so you might want to put your LinkedIn profile in your signature in your email or send it to people before you meet. Because, you know, if people, again, if there's confusion or there's, um, just kind of uh, a dilution of your brand out there, they're not going to be as excited. And if there is something out there that's either questionable or confusing, like the guy that just robbed the bank has your name, you can, let them know you're in on the joke. Like, thank you so much for agreeing to meet with me. I guess you realized I'm not the guy that just robbed the bank last week,
Yeah.
even though we have the same name. And so they show you have a sense of humor, you're digitally savvy, and that's like a feather in your cap. So I think being brand savvy is more important than ever, and I think people do need to think of themselves as a strong personal brand because in a digital world you do need to exist. You need to own that real estate in people's brains and stand for one, two things. Don't try and get too many messages out
Mm.
there. One, two, at most, three things you want to be known for and stand for. And if you do that well, people will remember and you reinforce it in everything that you do. It's on your website, it's in your signature, it's on your business card. So they're constantly being reminded that, that's who that person is. And, we talked a little bit, about blogging. I think blogging's great for people who like to write and blog. But the risk is if you start a blog and you do it 3 times on the first week The next week you're busy, you only do it once.
once. Yeah.
Then you're away for a week on vacation. Then you come back and you only do it once. And then you wait 2 weeks. That's a really bad
Mm.
strategy because again, you're training your audience that you're flaky, you can't be depended on, and you're not really having an ongoing conversation. So if blogging is not going to be a real commitment, just contribute to other people's blogs. You can be that voice of reason and you can show your humor, show your experience, show your smarts. And then every time you chime in, say something really great. And people will say, that Jurgen, I've read 3 or 4 posts. He always makes the smartest comment. And then if you have a signature bug that gets them back to your website, to your podcast, then you're building a great reputation. But you don't have to keep the blog going. You just contribute to another like minded, successful blog where you can be showcased.
Mm. Yeah, that idea of consistency is so important, isn't it? And and it's often better to say, whether it's blogging or podcasting or videos, whatever that might be. Say, well, I'm not going to start off with one a week or two a week. I'm going to start off with one a month, because
Exactly.
I think one a month I can sustain and really commit to sustaining that. At the same time, of course, you did point out of the importance of providing value. So one of the mistakes I do see people make a lot starting out, they start out with a frequency that's hard for them to sustain, and then um, they kind of rush some things through just to maintain that consistency, and it's very poor quality sometimes.
Absolutely. And
So
people do it with
the two
newsletters
things, yeah, the two things together are really important, aren't they?
for sure. And people do it with newsletters too. And I always say, you can have a monthly or bi monthly or quarterly newsletter. It doesn't need to be weekly or bi weekly. If that's too much of a commitment, start small, be known for quality. The quantity is absolutely not important if there's no magic to doing it weekly or bi-weekly or monthly or bi-monthly, but whatever you choose, commit to it and really have high standards so that when you end up in somebody's inbox or if they find your podcast, like you said, everyone is worth the time and energy
Mm.
to read or listen to. They're going to have a much better opinion of you and your business.
Yeah, well, there's kind of a philosophy in a lot of areas that the more touch points, the better. And this is sort of manifesting itself, particularly in email, where, and I know quite a number of people that do a daily email, and I think, wow, that's, I don't know how they can sustain that. And some of them are actually very good emails. But the issue I have as the consumer, I kind of open up my email, and my email is my primary tool where if I need to get something done or if somebody wants something from me, that's how they'll contact me first. They'll email me, they'll say, can you do this? And they'll give me the information I need so I can proceed with whatever they're asking me to do. But often I open up my email and here's this massive list of stuff, all these daily emails. So I've got to spend a lot of time flicking through and saying, well, where's the stuff I actually need that I've got to do something and I've got to respond to people or take action on. And I find that so frustrating. The first thing I do when I get into my email every morning is just look at the list that's all email. I don't even look at the filtered list, and I start ticking the things and start mass deleting until I get down to, okay, now here's the stuff I actually have to look at.
Exactly, because you want to be the name that pops up in the inbox
Hmm.
where he says, "Oh, I want to see what she has to say." This, that that person always doesn't waste your time, always either entertains you, informs you, educates you. So you're known for something of quality. If you're not an invited person into the inbox, if you're the clutter, if you're the noise, and you're the one that's getting deleted automatically, that is a very dangerous place because, you get one chance to make a great first impression.
Hmm.
And then, once you do that, you don't want to burn that bridge. You always want to be known as being that invited guest that, they want to hear from you because it's very easy to unsubscribe or hit delete. And once you do that, that's damaging and diluting your
Hmm.
brand.
Hmm. All right. I mean, we talked about how things have changed dramatically over the time you've run Mavens and Moguls since you started. In the last few years, of course, we've seen this dramatic rise of the large language models and AI, as it's been referred to, the chat GPTs of the world. How do you see those technologies evolving the marketing industry and impacting the marketing industry?
So, AI is uh, coming fast and furious. You can't ignore it by any means. But I think you also have to beware that, I think a lot of people are kind of testing it in a way that, let me see what I need to write this copy. I need to change my uh, website. I need to come up with a thought leadership piece. Let me go into AI to brainstorm and see what I can come up with. I think you have to be very, very careful because unless you really know what you're doing,
Mm.
um, you can tell pretty quickly now when things or people are sending you things that have been written in, with a robot. It's generic, it's bland, sometimes it's not even correct. Um, so I always tell people, the AI that matters the most right now, more than ever, are the authentic interactions. You know,
Love
you
it.
need
Yeah.
to stand out for being yourself and share those stories that only you can tell. Your backstory, your product or services, um, you know, the benefits that they offer, those are stories that only you can tell. And if you want to stand out, if you want to be remembered, you can use the AI tools, the chat GPT, to brainstorm ideas, to come up with maybe some headlines or doing some A/B testing with subject lines in an email newsletter. That's great, but really use the human felt filter.
Mm.
um, Keep that antenna up because, again, you do not want to dilute your brand where every time your name pops up, people know it's just going to be blah, 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 a bunch of noise that really doesn't tell them anything unique, special, or different. Again, you do not want to be a commodity. You do not want robotic, generic copy. What people, they don't remember data and um, facts and figures. They remember stories. Tell them the stories that are going to connect with them on an emotional level where they really remember, and you break through the noise and the clutter so that they go, oh, wow, this is exactly what I'm talking about. This is the kind of thing that will help me. It'll save me time, it'll save me money, it's more convenient. But tell those stories in case studies, in real on a real human level. Show your humanity. If you just, with marketing, I think a lot of people want to tell you about all the features, all
Mm.
the shiny, um, the bells, the whistles. It's like, they give you all the stats, all the data. There's a place for data, but people are not going to remember a brain dump of a lot of numbers and a lot of um, kind of mindless um, facts and figures. People remembered if you put it in the context of why that data matters. How does it affect your audience. Look at it from their perspective. Why is it going to matter to them? And when you do that and you kind of connect the dots and it really touches them, on an emotional level, that is really where the magic happens. That's where you get to stand out and kind of own that real estate in the brain of your audience.
Yeah, that's a really important message. And I've always, way back before AI, before ChatGPT, I've always said that the idea of sending out bulk email newsletters, which was kind of the fad of, well, I guess, the early 2000s, and still happening today, is using technology in the wrong way. I mean, it's fantastic that you can build a list and send out newsletters to that list, but you should be doing exactly what you've just said, connecting at a human level, rather than just one generic email to the entire list. And even if you do send a generic email to an entire list, that may be appropriate in certain instances where there's a news announcement about the company or whatever, um, that should still be done as if we're talking to one person and it's a
Right. I mean,
conversation.
with your inbox, a lot like mine, when you see dear friend or dear
Yeah,
recipient,
or even
you just
even worse, the wrong name.
exactly,
I can,
immediately,
yeah,
I can delete right now.
I can tell you so a lot of stories about podcasting agencies that pitch a guest to me, saying, you should have so and so on your podcast. And the best story I have, which is clearly using a template or a mass email, was dear. It was dear Cindy or something like that. So it was clearly the wrong name. And then they said, "We love your podcast, the XYZ show." So some name that I actually knew Cindy and I knew the XYZ podcast. So names have been changed to protect the innocent. But I thought, well, that's not me. But obviously she got one too.
You probably got the one with your name on it.
Maybe. So I went back and I said, "Hey, if you're going to use a template to send out a mass email, at least get the names right."
No, absolutely. I mean, and again, that's such a bad reflection on that firm.
Yeah.
And, again, you get one chance to make a great first impression when you're reaching out to people. So don't blow it.
Mm,
Because when you go back and try again, it's going to take a lot more time and a lot more money for them to give you another chance. So really, be respectful of your audience. Look at it from their perspective and think about like what would get you to open the email. How do you want them to feel? What do you want them to think about and take away once they finish reading it? And I think if you haven't really kind of done your homework, you're wasting your time and money.
mm,
So, um, it's better to do a great job and kind of less is more. Don't send out a million emails that are generic. Send out 10 that are personalized. Start with that and see how you do.
mm. Yeah, and it's you touched on something there that's so important. That's knowing your audience, knowing your potential clients. Who are they? What are they looking for? How do you speak to them? How do you connect with them? Where do you find them? All these kind of questions, right?
Exactly.
Mm. All right. Well, this is fascinating, Paige. I can go on talking marketing and personalizing marketing for ages, but I'm just my little timer thing that changes lights when we get to certain milestones has turned red there. So it's getting on a bit. I think it's a good point to move on to the buzz, which is our innovation round, the same 5 questions that I ask of every guest. And the idea is you'll give us some really clear and snappy answers that'll inspire the listener to go and do something awesome today as a result. All set?
I'm ready.
Okay. What's the number one thing anyone needs to do to be more innovative?
Have a growth mindset. Um, get comfortable being uncomfortable. Um, experiment, learn, um, and grow. And, if you stumble, you pick yourself up and you try again.
Hmm. Yeah, I love that. The growth mindset is so important, isn't it? And just to be really clear, I mean, the growth mindset is it's not necessarily glass half full versus glass half empty type scenario. It's more around, well, how can I improve this? Learning from, okay, that didn't work, but what do I learn from that? How can I change it, and how can I do something different that may work, or what do I learn?
Yeah, I don't believe in failure. I believe you either succeed or you learn something.
Hmm.
And if you learn something, then try it a different way. When you know better, do better.
Yeah, yeah. My business coach always says there's no such thing as failure. It's all feedback. Hmm.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Bingo.
yeah. All right. What's the best thing you've done to develop new ideas?
I like cross-pollinization.
Hmm.
So get out of your kind of your comfort zone. Instead of always going to the same three, four, five people, ask people in different categories, different industries. Um, Talk to them about what's working for them. What have they learned? What have they tried that's worked or not worked? So, for me, um, I remember during the Great Recession, 2008, 9, 10. It was a big political, crazy time. And the politicians kept going on these listening tours to try and talk to voters. And I thought, that's a great idea. I could do a listening tour. And, because the economy was kind of a mess. A lot of banks went under, the real estate market was underwater, and a lot of my businesses that were starting projects went on the back burner. And I thought, this might be a good time for me to go on a listening
Hmm.
tour. I had never done that before, but it was working for the politicians. And you know what? It's great for business too. So get out of your comfort zone and try stuff that might seem completely foreign or different, and see how you can apply that concept to your world. And I bet you'll learn something new.
Hmm. Yeah, I love that. That's one of the things I always like to do is that cross pollination, as you put it, and looking at. I often look at nature and think, I wonder how does that work in nature, and what can you learn from that? Because
Perfect.
that's where I think that's where a lot of innovation comes from. You say, well, it's not a new idea that's being done like this over here, but I can translate that into my field, and nobody's ever done it in my field, but I know how it works over here. So, yeah.
Exactly.
All right. Do you have a favorite tool you use most often?
So I'm kind of old school. I mean, I am I love technology, but I when I started my job on Wall Street in the 80s, I used what came before Excel, like an online spreadsheet, which is still kind of my crutch. I love email, I love Zoom, I love online spreadsheets for keeping track of everything from finances to kind of CRM. I'm a little bit of a creature of habit.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I get comfortable with stuff, and it just becomes kind of like a safety blanket for me. I'm
Hmm.
sure, like I have a lot of people that don't even email anymore. They either text or they use Loom or other video tools. I still love email, to be totally honest with you.
Hmm. Yeah. It's. I. I'm not surprised you said Zoom, and I was expecting you to say one of the one of the online conferencing platforms, given that your team is spread all around the world and you're working 24/7, and then the idea of cloud tools as well, because I guess that's important for the sharing aspect.
Exactly.
Hmm. All right, now what's the best way to keep a client on track?
So, I am a big believer in follow up and follow through. Documenting, even if you have uh, a weekly check in, on Zoom or on a conference call, or an email. I think it's really important to kind of codify and document the follow up and the follow through. I think, if it's too cavalier, too casual, I think a lot of things just slip through the cracks. So I try and, set the agenda, circulate it before the meeting. Somebody's in charge of documenting kind of what we heard, what we learned, and what the next steps are. Um, and that we're just kind of disciplined and precise about kind of how that we're going to track and measure success. And then after the fact, after something is completed, I'm a big believer in postmortems. What worked, what didn't work, what did we learn, what are we going to do different next time? Um, but I think if you, set up a conference call, or, a lot of people use Slack or Asana, and there's just this thread of, everything going on. If you don't kind of document and codify kind of the lessons learned or the next steps, I think it just gets lost in the shuffle. And I think it turns out being a big waste of everybody's
Hmm.
time. So try and identify, who the team leader is, who's in charge of the documentation, and just be disciplined about it. Again, it doesn't need to be an honors thesis with footnotes, and I'm not looking for a 20-page report. But at Procter and Gamble, P&G is big on one-page memos. I think less is more. High level, very direct, make sure people understand what is expected of them. What did we learn? What are we doing? What are we doing next? Um, and don't be scared. Again, if things don't work out as planned, make sure you don't skip the step of doing the postmortem, because that's
Hmm.
really where you learn the best stuff.
Yeah, that post mortem is really valuable, isn't it? And also looking at it from the point of view of what worked well, what do we keep, what do we do more of, and then okay, where could we improve what didn't work so well, and what do we do different next time to make sure that that thing works better. Hmm.
Exactly.
Hmm. All right, and what's the number one thing anyone can do to differentiate themselves?
Create a brand, be authentically yourself. What I think it's Oscar Wilde that says, be yourself, everyone else is
Yeah, yeah.
taken. You're the only one that has your story to tell. So you need to tell it in your way, um, that only you can do. And, again, find the right words and pictures, and, you know, treat yourself the way you would treat a product or service. What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? Where are the threats? Really digging into the marketing basics. I think people, when when they are the brand, they either don't take themselves as seriously,
Yeah.
or they can't be as honest about themselves. Um, so if you don't know what your strengths and weaknesses are, ask people
Hmm.
that you trust, that know you, and ask people from different parts of your life, people that know you personally, people that know you professionally, and ask them, what are the two or three, four words that come to mind when you think of me? What am I good at? What am I great at? What am I better at than anybody else you know? What are the things you would never want me to touch? And again, if you have people around you that you trust, you should start seeing themes emerge. And, if the feedback is either all over the place, or it's not the words that you were hoping to hear. You have to listen to that message
Yeah.
because, you know, you have an opportunity to kind of hit the reset button and course correct. And if you want people to think of you in a certain way, you need to kind of build those roots and reinforce those core values and core messages in everything that you do so that the next time you do that, that the right words are coming back, the right messages do resonate. So I think, again, everybody's a brand.
Hmm.
Figure out the brand that you want to be, that you want to stand for, and make sure that you reinforce it in everything that you do.
Yeah. Yeah. The personal SWOT analysis. Love it. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Hmm. All right. This has been wonderful, Paige. I'm really enjoying our conversation. Now, where can people find out more about you, about Mavens and Moguls, and maybe even get in touch to say thanks for what you've shared today?
So, two best places, my company website, mavensandmoguls.com, mavensandmoguls.com, or LinkedIn. Um, I, my last name is hyphenated, but on LinkedIn it's all smushed together. So PaigeArnoffenn, or as one of my clients said, because my last name is hyphenated and my company name has an ampersand in the middle, she can never remember all the words. So she Googles Paige and Mavens, and I pop right up.
Yeah,
So
excellent.
thank goodness for search engine optimization. You can find me that way too.
Yeah, excellent. And we'll make it even easier to find by placing those links in the show notes so people can click straight through. But there's a couple of tips there to find it easily if you are in the car listening to this or and you want to follow up afterwards when you get home. All right. Well, finally, before we wrap up the conversation, what action would you like our listener to take, Paige, out of our conversation today?
Well, I hope I've convinced you that, you need to be deliberate and plant the seeds that you want to see sprout. Um, be focused. Pick one or two messages, one or two platforms on social media. You do not need to spread yourself too thin. You do not want to dilute your message or dilute your brand. So I would just hope that everybody, leaves the podcast thinking, all right, let me go through with a kind of fresh lens and let me see what's working and what's not working. And maybe you ask someone you trust to say, start with my website, start with my LinkedIn profile, look at my account on Twitter X. Are you seeing themes emerge? Am I making sense? And make sure you ask people that can be honest with you, that will give you legitimate feedback. I've had clients come to me and they'd say, like, everybody loves what I'm doing. I don't understand why it's not selling.
Hmm.
But they're not talking to the customer, they're talking to their neighbor, their friend, their
Yeah.
spouse. Talk to people that'll be honest.
Excellent. Thanks for that call to action. It is really important, isn't it, to focus on one or two areas. And I've certainly taken that advice on board in the last couple of years when I thought, okay, it's costing me a fair bit of time to post this to various social media, and I've cut right back to LinkedIn and Instagram is where I'm active. So that is important. And so identify those things. Love the advice. And really enjoyed our conversation today, Paige. All the best for the future, and please do stay in touch.
Thank you so much. It's been awesome talking to you. I've had a lot of fun, and I hope that people get a lot out of our conversation.